but like so many other people in our parish in Kerry, there wasn't a whole lot to do other than play Gaelic football. We didn't have hurling, we didn't have soccer, we didn't have rugby. That's changed possibly in the meantime. But my father was very interested in the GAA. I was born in Dublin, actually, and we moved down from Dublin when I was 2 years of age. Myself and my brother was 4 years of age at the time, and my father played a little bit with Ballymount Kickhams in the 70s while we were living in Dublin, but he was obsessed with football, and we're all the family. So you kind of didn't lick it up off the ground. The conversations were always football. The minute you went to junior infants in school, it was all football, and it probably afforded you a certain status after a while if you were any good at football. So once you made the primary school team, when you're 7 or 8 years of age, that gives you extra special status within the school. And likewise up along then secondary school, pretty much similar. It was always in the background because of my father's obsessive interest in football, and the neighbouring parishes and everything like that. Football was the morning conversation, the afternoon and the evening conversation, and fortunately enough at the time as well, when I was a kid in junior infants and right up through to 6th class in school, Kerry were right in the middle of their golden era, as Dublin are right now. So we had plenty of heroes as well to look up to at the time. I think like most young lads, your father and mother, they give you great support, and we're very fortunate in that regard. We had an underage trainer as well, a guy called Liam O'Rohan. Underage training wasn't as structured as it is today, and there certainly weren't cool GAA, cool camps or any of that going on. But Liam O'Rohan would have taken 45 young kids on his own sometimes, which probably would have been frowned upon right now. But he took us under his wing. He had about 7 primary schools west of Dingle, everybody feeding into him, all small rural primary schools. And again, he didn't play a whole lot of football himself. He returned from Cape Clear Island off the west coast of Cork in 1983. Borden and Ogan, the Ghaeltacht, had just kicked off in the early 80s, late 70s, and Liam just gave it the injection that was needed. And he just gave it time, his energy, his patience, and he was a huge influence as well as the family background at home. But Liam O'Rohan, and if you speak to Dara O'Shea, Tomás O'Shea, Mark O'Shea, all the lads that went on to play with Kerry, we all came under his wing. And he wasn't a tactical genius by his own admission even, but he was a huge influence on us as kids. Yeah, Paddy O'Shea and I gave 10 years travelling in the same car together to training. He was 8 years Kerry senior manager and 2 years under 21 manager. So for all those years, either I'd have been driving or he would have been driving. And it was an hour and a half journey each way. So you're 3 hours in the car with him as well as on the training ground for a couple of hours with him. So yeah, Paddy was a wellspring of stories and, just yarns and hot balls and, a huge source of knowledge and information to us as well. There was a very serious side to Paddy. It's one of the few things he was serious about was football. And I suppose he instilled in us certain values, made a huge impression on us in terms of how to behave and how to carry yourself as a Kerry footballer, what was expected of you socially, what was expected of you match days, what was expected of you in a training session, and what was expected of you and your behaviour on the pitch, in all the mannerisms and habits we would have had, like Paddy would have moulded and developed over the years. And outside the football pitch, then it was just non-stop crack with Paddy, and he left a huge impression, and I suppose testament to that, he's nearly dead 8 years at this stage. There isn't a day goes by back here in the Ghaeltacht that people don't talk about him or don't go down memory lane and say, do you remember that day when Paddy did this, or do you remember that day when Paddy said that? So Paddy will never be forgotten around here. As long as people that remember him live, Paddy's memory will never die. And of course, the statue is up in Ardmore now to him, and it's something that we felt as a community was important to do at the time, to mark the man's legacy as much as anything else. He left a huge impression, and he will be forever credited, I think, with turning the fortunes of Kerry football when it had reached its lowest ebb in the mid-90s that time. And he gave us that confidence and that mishnach to drive on and become half-decent Kerry footballers anyway. I remember to this day getting a letter from the County Board the 18th of September 1993 to say you have been selected to represent Kerry. The old traditional ways they had of doing things internet, pre-emails, pre-social media, anything. You get a letter with headed county board papering. It was the day I started college in Limerick at the same day, the exact same day. Dropped into one of Ogie Moran's sessions on the way up to Limerick and went onwards to Limerick to college for my first day in college. And made the debut then, I suppose, a couple of months later in the National League game, early 94 against Mayo and Ballina. It was a game that Maurice Fitzgerald won again for us. He kicked the winning goal at the time, chipped the goalie. And, Jack O'Shea, Kerry man, was in charge of Mayo the same day. So they're my memories of my first day out in a Kerry senior jersey. We had, myself and Dara O'Shea were invited in around the same time, and we had been tagging along for a few of the National League games, but to get out on the pitch and play against Mayo and Ballina with a senior jersey was a huge, huge thing at the time. And Maurice Fitzgerald made an impression that day and for many, many years afterwards. The first time I would have played in Croke Park, Kerry weren't playing a lot in Croke Park in those years. They weren't at the top table they were in the doldrums really in terms of Kerry football at the time. So we didn't get to play in Croke Park a whole lot in 93, 94. I think the first time I would have played in Croke Park was a National League game. I was a sub against Dublin in 1993. We didn't get to go out and play, either Dara or myself. But then in 94, we would have played down, an unpleasant experience. They beat us. They were All-Ireland champions at the time, National League game. And it took a full year again before we got to play in Croke Park against Tyrone in 95. And they also beat us. And that our stock was low at the time. We weren't, I wouldn't say whipping boys. We were still in Division 1. We were still playing the top teams. But our Kerry's football stock had fallen. And I do remember, being disappointed almost the first time I played in Croke Park, because not just with the surrounds, it was the old Croke Park and it was starting to look a bit shabby. And the pitch wasn't as pristine and as beautiful as it is now. The stands certainly weren't there at the time. And I remember at the time saying, this is, where my childhood heroes played. This is where Kerry won all those titles in the 70s and 80s. And I had been there as a spectator, of course. But to play on the pitch, I have to say it was a small disappointment the first time. It wasn't until 2002 that Croke Park really got the pitch in order. And ever since then, for the last 18 years, it's the best pitch in the world, let alone the best pitch in Ireland. It's a beautiful, beautiful surface and a beautiful stadium. But it wasn't always thus, particularly towards the mid-90s when I was starting off playing there. Being so far away from Dublin, you'd have to travel up to Dublin the night before the game, and you'd stay in hotels. Paddy had his favourite hotels. He had his pishogues and he had his superstitions. And we used to actually have mass in the morning of the game, and it was all a big routine for us. You'd do the same walks, the same drills all the way up along. The trip into Croke Park from the hotel, that's actually, I think, and I think a lot of players would say it, it's probably the most nervous you are. Not so much when you hit Croke Park, you're at ease again when you're in Croke Park, but the trip between a hotel and Croke Park on a big day of match day, you do tend to get that bit nervous because you just have that little bit of energy. You're trying to pass the morning by watching nonsense on television maybe and trying to get to 2 o'clock or 3:30 or whatever time the game is. So I always felt at ease the minute we hit the tunnel, especially in the new Croke Park. There was a sense of familiarity about it. You were enveloped by the concrete and you're in the bowels of the stadium at that stage. And I think that was a big thing for me as a footballer. My nerves used to settle then. I used to get nervous on the way in between the hotel and Croke Park because you're seeing Kerry people dressed, decked out with their flags and everything, and you're trying your best, yes, to take in the atmosphere, but in hindsight, even 20 years later, you're saying you wish you had taken in more because you're so tuned in to what's going on, who you sit with on the bus, what your target is for 3:30. So getting into the dressing rooms was a big thing. I also had a superstition in the dressing rooms where Micheál Muirtig was the voice of the GAA and RT at the time. He's a good personal friend as well. So I had to meet Micheál and have a little chat with Micheál inside in the dressing room. And over the years, in the 12 years that I would have played with Kerry, it was a kind of a superstition or a pishogue between the two of us that he'd sit down alongside me and we'd have a chat inside in the dressing room. And again, that all helped to settle the nerves. You're taking your water on board, you're getting your strappings if needs be, you're doing all the things that need to be. But Micheál somehow had some magical access to the dressing rooms always. Some players didn't like it. Some managers certainly didn't like it. But I loved that our little conversations that I used to have with Micheál. Just shooting the breeze just before you go out onto the pitch, and Michal was also part of my pre-match routine inside the dressing room. How's it going? How are they all at home? Because Michal is a West Kerry man at the end of the day. And he just helped me always settle over the years inside the dressing room. Yeah, on the bigger days, everything is laid out for you. The Croke Park authorities have everything sorted, the management have everything sorted. It's all choreographed, it's all organised, really, really well done. My ambition always was to get to the point of the ball being thrown in and not to have expended any nervous energy. Now, on big days, you have an awful lot of formalities. It's a privilege, of course, to meet the president, to march behind the Artane Boys band, to march, in front of your own supporters, to march across Hill 16, usually opposition supporters there. But my trigger always was, once I got out of the tunnel, to get a couple of kicks in. I was taking frees. I like to sense how you'd have got a sense of it before the game. You might watch the minor match and get a sense of which way the wind is blowing, what difficulties the minor players are having, kicking a particular direction. Because one thing about Croke Park, and especially the old Croke Park, the wind tended to change. It's more structured now, and I think even in a gale force wind, you tend to have down at pitch level, you tend to have more control of the ball. But once you run out into the tunnel, you do get that assault in the senses. You do get that buzz, and it's a huge adrenaline rush. Even years where we would have run out for the All Ireland final, and Croke Park authorities have Sam Maguire right in front on a pedestal. I actually never noticed that when I was playing the game. It's only afterwards. I never, ever, ever noticed it. And it's amazing that you could run by the Sam Maguire, what you're trying to win, and not actually notice it. And that tells you where your mind is, really, I suppose, at that stage. And all those years that Sam Maguire, and I played in 5, 6 All-Ireland finals, I never noticed Sam Maguire being there. It was afterwards somebody told me in my final one that it's there. And the other one the other trigger I would have before in a pre-match sense was Oran Avian as part of every big match ritual. And there's a line in our Avian which says "Fui vod Veser," and it mentions freedom, which was so hard won in this country. And I always use that as, okay, if you're still nervous, how could you be nervous? There's 80,000 people here, yes, but it's an absolute privilege to have that freedom out in the pitch in front of these people to represent your county, whatever county that is. And I used to always use that line in our Avian, "Fui vod Veser," to, I suppose, divest myself of any remaining nervous energy I would have had. It's just pure exhilaration after that. Preparation is done, homework is done. Don't always play well afterwards, but at least there's no excuse for nervous energy or anything like that. That to me was a huge part of it. That hour on the Vian was the final. You had your Micheál Martins, you had your pre-match speeches, you had everything, but the final one was always "Fui vod Veser." That you're a free person in the middle of Croke Park in front of 80,000 people with your county colours on, and that to me was a privilege. And I'm glad I learned that as I went along. I'm glad I had that I didn't, because my first All Ireland final I was extremely nervous over, but by the time I got to the end, all the pre-match rituals and routines helped me settle. There was a familiarity to them. The final whistle was in the old days, and I'm still a big fan of the pitch invasions. I know why they don't have them. There's probably good reasons for them, but I disagreed fundamentally with Croke Park when they didn't have them, because I loved that element of a crowd anticipating their team winning in All Ireland and just jumping the barriers. Of course, there was health and safety issues there. I'm sure there were, but it was such a huge thrill to be out in the pitch, especially when you're winning. And I was on the pitch when we lost a few of them as well. And in '97, when we won our first one, that was the sense. Like I had been taken off with a few minutes remaining in that final. Maurice Fitzgerald kicked the final point, and we were just ready to run onto the pitch and to get to the players and to get to our colleagues before the crowd rushed on. Because that's a childhood memory you have. I remember Offaly in 1982, and they filled the pitch in euphoria when they beat Kerry, and just to be part of that. And it is a very physical environment, probably more physical than the match itself at times. But that was the big feeling in '97. We finally done it. 11 years without an All Ireland, and it was the first year in Kerry that the new breed of supporter was there. Because in the old days when Kerry were winning in the '70s and '80s, there wasn't so much of a. There was massive support, but it wasn't as colourful. The whole notion of replica jerseys wasn't a thing. Massive flags and bunting and everything like that wasn't a big thing in the '70s and '80s. But this had come along with Wexford the previous year in hurling in '96, and Offaly and teams in the early Clare, they brought great fanfare to it. So this was our first experience of that, and just being absolutely mauled by your friends and neighbours that are running out onto the pitch and jumping on your back and banging you in the back. It's a huge, huge exhilaration. And after about 30 seconds, you start to think, geez, I need to get in near the presentation area to see my captain lifting the cup. So that was the next thing. And in fairness, again, Croke Park were very good like that. They'd get the stewards around and you'd say, listen, I was playing there about a minute ago, and they'd see the boots and the togs on you and say, I'll go on away and pass the card. And they mightn't always recognise you, but they knew who was playing. And, everybody, 30 players eventually got inside that cordon. But I was a huge fan of those pitch invasions, I have to say. We beat Galway after a replay, and Galway were our main rivals at the time. And of all the teams that we would have played over those years, I suppose they were the teams we struck up the best relationship with as well. There was a huge respect between the two counties. We played football a similar style. I think we would have been the first to acknowledge that Galway were very unlucky to not to win the drawn game, and then we won the replay and didn't look like we were in danger of it. And again, it was a different vibe in 1997, because in 2000, people remember probably that the old Hogan stand was gone, was demolished. The renovations had started, and there were no pitch invasions. The presentation was out in the middle of the field. Our captain, who was probably the best captain I ever played under, Seamus Moynihan, lifted the cup that day, and we got to do a lap of honour, which was a different vibe. And again, people speak about that in the modern day, where there are no pitch invasions, obviously, and it's nice probably to get time with your aunts and uncles and family and friends, that you pick them out in the crowd and make them off. And I do remember seeing my uncle inside in the lower deck of the Hogan stand being under reconstruction and being able to have a chat with him. But it was different. I yearned for the pitch invasions, I have to say. I preferred the pitch invasions. I preferred the whole notion of a community celebrating together, rather than you specifically getting to pick out family members and stuff like that, which is very personal and very nice. But I think supporters like that element of it, and it was a bit strange. I know it was one of the Meath footballers at the time, because they were the reigning All-Ireland champions. They had got knocked out earlier on the championship, and they said, who wants to win an All-Ireland on a building site anyway? And Croke Park was a building site for 2000 in terms of the atmosphere and the vibe. But it was very, very different. And the podium, was your makeshift podium right in the middle of the field. But it was very, very satisfying to know that you had a second medal. It was kind of probably validation, because we didn't win 98 and 99, obviously, and you're starting to get concerned. Maybe we were a flash in the pan. Maybe we were one hit wonder. So I think, and especially in Kerry, they do all the medals are hard won. But when the second one comes, it was nice. And Kerry had this thing probably unsaid at the time. They had won the Centenary All-Ireland. They had won a lot of landmark All-Irelands. 2000 was a landmark year to be winning the All-Ireland. They were the Millennium Champions. It was an easy tag to throw on with it. But that was a great Galway team at the time, and they could have possibly beaten us in the drawn game. And we came out the other side of it, thankfully. Again, of course, it was a huge privilege. And you often hear kids and adults saying it's something you dream of as a child. I'm not necessarily of the belief that that's true. You want to win your next game always, and of course it's a huge privilege. Again, it's hard to talk about it without referencing the game itself. We beat Mayo in the final, and the game was one-sided enough. Mayo just didn't perform on the day, and we performed really, really well. And you knew with about 10 minutes to go that this was, we were going to be winning it. Whereas a lot of games go down to the wire and you don't know until the last minute or so, or until injuries time. But about 10, 15 minutes to go, you knew the game was up for Mayo, and that it just struck me again. I had come off injured about 9 or 10 minutes to go, and I was getting physiotherapy on the sideline. The tartan track on the sideline, and the physio Ethan Ivry said to me, "Ask Gaeilge in Irish, you're going to have to be thinking of your speech." And genuinely, you're so vested in the game. God, yeah, you're right. And I didn't want to jinx myself by having a prepared speech. So we just had a brief conversation, myself and the physio. What do you say? You've seen enough All-Ireland speeches, just thank everybody, basically. And usually there's a steward in Croke Park gets to grab you and say, come on, we need to get up the steps. But it was easy. I was just right at the bottom of the steps, getting physio treatment. We win the All-Ireland. Small bit of a celebration with friends and supporters and colleagues, of course, and you're up on the terrace or up on the steps before you know it. And then there's a familiar Kerry man up as president, Uachtarán Cumann Class Girls at the time, was Sean Kelly, who had been county board chairman when I started off playing with Kerry, and had suffered himself, I suppose, 10 years of all those years of Kerry not winning titles. So it was a nice personal moment between myself and Sean. We were able to have a chat while the crowd settled down, so he didn't have to give his speech. And I just said to Sean, geez, if I forget anybody here, will you let me know? Because I had no note, and he did. In fairness, I nearly forgot our county board, who are a very important part of the jigsaw. And he said it to me, county board. So yeah, it was a very easy one. And it's a view I didn't have, obviously, in the previous All-Ireland wins I was captain. You're looking down, and it is lovely. And again, that's why I'm such a huge fan of the pitch invasions. I could see people from my own club down the pitch. I could see my friend who I started off playing with, Dara Ó Cinnéide. We played, from 18 years up with Kerry together. He was injured for that final. He was in crutches right down below me. And I had been there 2 years previously when Armagh beat us, looking up at Kieran McGeeney, I think. And there was Dara down below. And, it was a nice little moment, like our eyes caught. And, his disappointment in not playing, because he was our best player that year, probably. He couldn't play. But I was able to pick out all the Gaeltacht faces. And as the speeches are going on by the officials, by Sean Kelly, you can see the Gaeltacht people coming closer and closer and pushing their way up to see because that's what you are. You're just representing your club and your parish, lifting that cup. Like, you're wearing a Kerry jersey, of course. But all I could think of was the previous St. Patrick's Day. We had lost the All-Ireland club. And we had gone through 2 bad years, losing to Tyrone in 2003, to Armagh in 2002. And Dara Ó Cinnéide was captain against Armagh in that All-Ireland final in 2002. And we dearly wanted to get him up those steps. So it was a bit strange to be looking down on him and me up there in 2004. And, you'd feel like kind of calling him up, but he was in crutches, and I knew he wouldn't want to make a show of it anyway. Like, he wouldn't have come up anyway, But it was a nice, our eyes caught for a split second as I lifted the cup, and I'll never forget that. And I do remember all the Gaeltacht people, and my future wife actually out on the pitch on the shoulders of my future brother-in-law, and being able to catch her eye as well. We had been going out for a number of years at that stage. So there were some very personal moments even in that pitch invasion. And again, it's a huge community moment. Everybody in the Gaeltacht seemed to be up the front row, listening to the speech. They were probably the only people that understood the speech as well at the time, because it was all done as Gaeilge in the Irish language, but it was important to me that I would do that. Representing the Gaeltacht in Croke Park, I would consider to be probably the greatest achievement any of us ever had in our football careers, including the Kerry jersey. Playing for Kerry is a different thing altogether. You reach a certain level, you try and stay at that level, you make wonderful friendships, and it's a bigger scale of things when you're playing with Kerry. With the club, it's so personal. I would say to this day, it's one of the biggest crowds that ever was at an All-Ireland club final. I do remember going in that day from the hotel and seeing them open the gates. They had to open the gates because they didn't have enough gates open. Caltra, we played. It was Dunloy and Newtown Chandram in the hurling. So you had 4 big communities coming up, all supporting their club. And to this day, of all the things I've ever done in the football pitch, it's the one I'm most proud of. It didn't end up the way we wanted it. We lost the All-Ireland club final in 2004 by a kick of a ball. I had a chance in the last minute to maybe rescue it for the club, but it didn't. It went over the bar instead of under the crossbar, and it was heartbreaking because, again, Dara Ó Cinnéide was our captain as well, and we really wanted to get him up on those steps. But on the other side, and I reconciled myself with it over the years, we were beaten by a club who were very similar to ourselves, who were a rural club, who probably were going to be there in a once-off, and as that's proven since, Caltra. They were there in 2004. They probably will never be there again. I think we knew at the time out in the pitches, we were watching Noel Meehan lifting the cup, that we probably wouldn't be back there. We're not big enough. We came in Kerry from a junior B level right up to senior level. We won the senior championship twice. We got one shot at glory, and it didn't happen for us. It did happen for Caltra. And I identify with their story. It would be different if we were beaten by one of the super clubs, the Nemo Rangers, Crossmaglen, any of these clubs that are used to winning at St. Vincent's. For us, it was 2 rural clubs playing each other, winner takes all. Unfortunately, from our point of view, they took all that day, and it didn't work out for us. But to this day, it's what I'm most proud of, that we managed to bring our community, a Gaeltacht Irish-speaking community, up to Croke Park, to get them playing music down O'Connell Street. I didn't see any of this. I was only told about this afterwards. They bought a traditional boat, a currach, and they have as we call them, drove it down O'Connell Street, stopped the traffic, played a few polkas and a few tunes with the box, and people who had no interest in Gaelic football probably, but saw this as a community thing, and it's a lot more personal when it comes to things like that. So we had the Ghaeltacht jersey, Ghaeltacht colours, Ghaeltacht flags in Croke Park. It didn't work out for us. It did for Caltra. They tell the fairy tale, but to this day we can tell the story that we were there. We were there, and I totally understand. For people who lose All Ireland's like by a kick of a ball as we did, because we've done it with Kerry and we've done it with the Ghaeltacht, and it's not that nice. But it's with the Ghaeltacht, we'll never again have days like that. And we probably knew it at the time. We were on the crest of a wave. We were in a golden era for the club. And it's something I'm very, very proud of. Prouder than all I've ever won with Kerry. Maurice Fitzgerald is one of the most interesting sportsmen, not just in Kerry, but I think in Ireland. He plays the game very much like Mick O'Connell, another previous Kerry footballer, played, like, for the love of the game. He loved kicking the ball. He loved catching the ball. He loved those aspects of the game. Didn't play it for, recognition or for anything else. Didn't buy into any of the fanfare. He's a true football man, a true GAA man. He's been a great coach to St. Mary's in South Kerry since he finished playing, got involved back with Kerry football. But to play with him for those years, and for many of the years that I was playing with Kerry, Morris was there. And had he been there 1 or 2 years later, we mightn't have lost what we lost as well. But he was just a beautiful footballer to watch. There was a grace and an elegance to his game that you don't see that often. It's uncommon. The way he kicked the ball, how he practiced his skills, how he mastered the skills in the biggest of occasions, how he had the mentality and the coldness to deliver on the biggest of days. He was just a class apart, a different footballer altogether. He looked different. Very, brown skinned, tanned. He was just. Everybody seemed to like Morris, and he played for many years with Kerry without winning a whole lot, without huge reward. And the fear in Kerry was for a lot of those years that he would retire without ever actually winning anything. Fortunately, towards the tail end of his career, he won 2 All Irelands and almost managed to win one on his own in '97. But the word is a privilege. Like, it was a privilege to play with all the great players, that we would have played with over the years. There are too many to mention, but like the Seamus Moynihan would stand out as another great player, and all the O'Sheas and Colin Cooper and Declan Sullivan. There were so many of them there. But Fitzgerald, to my mind, and to this day, is still my favourite footballer because of the style he brought to it. I mean, everybody else brought different traits to it, including style, but Morris was pure style, and there was a hardness to his game. And I always thought he was playing football for the right reasons, for pure love of the game. The man is probably in his late 40s now. I don't even know what age he's. I'm sure he's 50, but he's still going around kicking the ball, and he still gets the same pleasure from kicking the ball. And if Morris could keep playing at inter-county level or at a very high level to this day, I'm sure he would. He's just an amazing, amazing footballer who plays the game for all the right reasons. The most memorable moment would be being part of that movement, a community movement that got the Gaeltacht to the All-Ireland Club final in 2004. We were fortunate enough to have many great moments in a Kerry jersey as well, but it's always the small, the local, the community ones that get you right to the heart. I could take, huge disappointment from losing All Irelands with Kerry against Armagh and Tyrone the latter years of my career. And we lost the All Ireland Club final in 2004 as well. But it was a bit more than just a game of football that day, and that year, that movement where people needed a lift and they got a lift from their local club, from their red and white jersey, from their local people, where you're going to local businesses looking for local support. It's the GAA at its best. And I'm sure clubs, the county and the country over, have similar stories. Not all of them get to play in Croke Park. That's the ultimate, of course. We were so fortunate to have done that. And the result didn't work out, but to this day, and I'm sure to the day we die, and there are people in the Gaeltacht that will mention that. It doesn't lessen the disappointment, but at the same time, again, I'd use the word privilege. It was such a privilege, to be part of that movement. And I don't call it a game or a championship. It was a movement, a community movement that got us that far, and just short of the final few steps. But we got there, and we were there, and we can always say that the Gaeltacht flags and jersey was to be seen in Croke Park, which not too many clubs can say that. This was the toughest opponent. The opponent I most respected was Darren Fay from County Meath. Fantastic fullback, traditional fullback, strong, fast. And what I really respected about him and I liked about him is there were days where you might get the better of him, he might get the better of you, but he never opened his mouth. He never said anything. You never got the impression how he was on the field of play. He was kind of an enigmatic kind of a player, exceptionally strong, represented Ireland against the Australians and physically was able for them as well. He was just a great footballer on a very good meat team between 96 and 2001, where they won 2 All-Irelands, but I would have been full forward in days, National League games, All-Ireland semi-finals, different games, our paths would have crossed. And he was the one fella outside of Kerry because you're meeting top class defenders inside and training every night. But Darren Fay was, just an exceptional defender, and I really respect him for never actually opening his mouth and saying a word to me on the pitch. That's something I always like. Just play the game and shake hands afterwards and walk away. The main advice and the old cliche you hear is practice, left and right hand, right hand. But the advice that will stand to you, I suppose, right throughout your career, in your teens and into early adulthood is don't ever get discouraged. I played 12 years at inter-county level. I have 3 All-Ireland medals. That means I failed 9 years of those 3, apparently. You just don't get discouraged by, you're not going to win all the matches. And it took me a while to figure that one out because we won an awful lot underage. But don't ever get discouraged by losing. Just always try and come back harder. And it is the old cliche again. The next game is the one. It's not what the 9 or 10 points that you kicked last weekend. It's what you're going to do next weekend. And it's not, I would say main one would be practice left and right, but don't ever get discouraged by losing a game or missing a ball. It's always about the next one. When you think back in your playing career, it's amazing how little you remember at this distance. I'm finished in the game now, and I played my last game with Kerry, the All-Ireland final 2005 against Tyrone, and you don't actually remember how the game went, but how you do remember is the people you met and how they made you feel about the game, and the things that you might have practiced 1,000 times in Killarney, working out on a bigger stage. They're the real thrills that you get. So there's no single high point where you say, oh, you lifted Sam Maguire, that should be a high point. Of course it was. But the high points and the thrills that stay with you are, travelling in the car with Paddy O'Shea, seeing Maurice Fitzgerald's genius up close, trying out a kick with the outside of the boot, knowing that you've done 100 times in training, but you haven't tried it out here in this setting and it working. And knowing that your teammates, could rely on you sometimes, more times than not all. They're the small little things that stand with you. How you got a text from somebody you might have respected after the game and saying, delighted for you or whatever. They're all those accumulation of small things. There is no single high point. Getting the All-Ireland club final, getting to that, that's an obvious high point. But it's always the small little things, the simple pleasures of kicking a ball and knowing that you've connected well with it, or watching Dara O'Shea go for a ball high and coming down with it and giving you a pass. Those kind of things, they're the highlights. All the games that I've ever played with Kerry, they've all kind of merged into one. You're not sure, was it that game or this game or what game, but what you do remember is the personalities and how they made you feel about the game, and some of the awesome stuff that certain individuals did. That kind of stuff tends to stay with you. So I couldn't single out one single highlight, one single game, but it's the simple pleasure of kicking a ball and knowing that you've connected well with it. That would be the one.